What if the greatest player of his generation walked away from everything he built, just to chase one more shot at glory with the team that broke his heart the most? Somewhere in a quiet room, away from cameras, away from reporters, away from the noise of an entire league holding its breath, two men who have spent a decade trying to destroy each other on a basketball court are sitting across from one another as friends. One of them has 4 championship rings and a resume that will never be matched. The other has 3 rings of his own, a reputation as the most relentless competitor in the sport, and a franchise that is running out of time. And what they decide in that room could change the entire landscape of the NBA. This is the story of how the Golden State Warriors, a team that once stood as LeBron James's fiercest rival, became the team chasing him hardest of all. This is the story of Draymond Green, the man who battled LeBron in 4 different NBA finals, suddenly becoming his biggest recruiter. And this is the story of a decision that, even now, nobody can predict with certainty. Stay with me, because this one has more twists than anyone expected. Let's rewind for a second, because to understand how strange this moment really is, you have to remember where these two men came from. For most of the last decade, there was no relationship in basketball more intense than the one between LeBron James and the Golden State Warriors. For times, LeBron's teams met Golden State in the NBA Finals. For times, the basketball world watched 2 dynasties collide. Draymond Green was right there in the middle of it every single time, guarding LeBron, talking trash to LeBron, celebrating championships against LeBron. The Warriors won 3 of those 4 series. LeBron and his teams won just 1. For years, if you wanted to know what real rivalry looked like in the NBA, you looked at LeBron James versus the Golden State Warriors. And yet, underneath all of that competitive fire, something else was always there. Respect. A strange, quiet bond between LeBron and Draymond that never fully made sense to outsiders. They pushed each other to their limits on the court, but off the court, they talked. They laughed. They showed up on each other's podcasts. They spoke about each other with a kind of admiration that rivals usually don't share. Basketball fans noticed it for years, this odd friendship hiding behind the fiercest rivalry in the sport. Nobody could have guessed that this friendship would one day become the centerpiece of the biggest free agency story in NBA history. Now let's jump forward to this summer. The summer of 2026. The moment everything changed. For 8 years, LeBron James wore the purple and gold of the Los Angeles Lakers. He built a legacy there. He chased championships there. He became a Laker legend, joining the list of names that will forever be remembered in that franchise's history. But legacies eventually reach their final chapter, and this summer, LeBron made a decision that sent shockwaves through the entire basketball world. He informed the Lakers that after this coming season, he would be playing somewhere else. Think about that for a moment. The most decorated player of his generation, a 4-time champion, the all-time leading scorer in NBA history, telling the franchise that had been his home for nearly a decade that it was time to move on. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a rumor started by an anonymous source. It was real, and it was happening. And the second that news broke, the entire league turned its attention to one single question. Where's LeBron James going to play basketball next? Almost immediately, one name rose above all the others in a way that surprised absolutely everyone. The Golden State Warriors. Think about how strange that sentence sounds if you say it out loud. The Golden State Warriors, the very team that had spent years standing between LeBron and more championships, suddenly emerged as one of the most serious threats to sign him. It felt almost impossible. It felt like something out of a movie. But it was real, and the Warriors were not being quiet about it. Golden State understood something important about their own situation. Stephen Curry is not getting any younger. Draymond Green is not getting any younger. Steve Kerr, the coach who built this dynasty, understands better than anyone that championship windows do not stay open forever. This summer represented something the Warriors front office viewed as maybe their very last realistic chance to add another enormous piece to the puzzle and chase one more title before the clock runs out on this era completely. So the front office made a decision. They were going to go all in. Not halfway. Not with a light touch. All in, on landing LeBron James. And the first move in that pursuit came from the player who already had the deepest personal connection to LeBron. Stephen Curry. Picture this. 2 of the most recognizable faces in basketball history, sitting down together, away from the noise, away from social media speculation, just talking. Curry, the greatest shooter the game has ever seen, and LeBron, a player who has already accomplished nearly everything there is to accomplish in this sport, having a real conversation about what it might look like to finally play together instead of against each other. For years, fans had fantasized about what a LeBron and Curry partnership could look like. Now, for the first time, that fantasy had a real conversation behind it. That meeting alone was enough to send shockwaves through the league. But it was only the beginning. Because not long after, the story took an unexpected turn. It wasn't just Curry making the pitch anymore. Draymond Green stepped into the picture, and things suddenly got a lot more interesting. Reports began surfacing that Green and LeBron were spending time together. Not just a quick handshake at an event. Real time. The kind of time that suggests a real conversation is happening about a real future together. According to reporting from ESPN insider Shams Charania, the two were spotted together during the same stretch that free agency speculation was heating up to its highest point. It wasn't just a friendly hangout between two guys who happened to know each other. It was being read across the league as something much bigger. A recruiting pitch. Draymond Green, the heart and soul of the Warriors' locker room, doing everything in his power to convince LeBron James that Golden State was the right next chapter. Now here's where the story gets even more layered, because Draymond didn't just talk. He acted. In a move that stunned people around the entire league, including rival executives who watch these kinds of situations for a living, Draymond Green made the surprising decision to decline his player option for the upcoming season. That option was worth close to $28 million. Declining it meant walking away from guaranteed money. It meant stepping into a much more uncertain financial situation. And the timing of that decision could not have been more telling. Why would one of the most fiercely competitive, financially savvy veterans in the league voluntarily give up nearly $30 million in guaranteed salary? The answer, according to those close to the situation, was flexibility. By opting out, Green gave the Warriors front office more room to maneuver financially. More room to make a serious run at bringing in the pieces they needed to build a roster capable of luring LeBron James to the Bay Area. It was, in essence, a sacrifice. A statement. Draymond Green was willing to bet on himself, and bet on the future of this franchise, in order to give Golden State every possible advantage in chasing the biggest name on the free agent market. People around the league were stunned. Insiders who cover these front office decisions for a living admitted they did not see it coming. It was the kind of move that told everyone paying attention just how serious the Warriors were, and just how personally invested Draymond Green had become in making this happen. But LeBron James was never going to be a simple, one-dimensional puzzle. Because as the Warriors pushed harder, another name entered the equation. A name that changed everything about how realistic this pursuit actually was. Anthony Davis. According to reporting from ESPN, Golden State's interest in LeBron James was tightly connected to a much bigger idea. Not just signing LeBron, but pairing him with Anthony Davis as well. The vision inside the Warriors' front office was almost unbelievable to imagine. Stephen Curry. Draymond Green. LeBron James. Anthony Davis. For players who, between them, have combined for an almost absurd number of championships, all-star appearances, and legendary basketball moments. If the Warriors could somehow pull off both additions, they wouldn't just be building a good team. They would be building one of the most star-studded rosters basketball has ever seen. But that dream came with a catch. According to ESPN's Ramona Shelburne, Golden State wanted a real commitment from LeBron before they would even begin pursuing a serious trade for Davis. In other words, the two moves were tied together. LeBron needed to show he was serious about joining the Warriors before ownership and the front office would spend the assets required to bring in Davis as well. It became something of a delicate dance. Golden State wasn't going to give up valuable trade pieces chasing Davis unless they were confident LeBron would actually show up. And at the same time, adding Davis might be exactly what LeBron needed to see in order to fully commit. It was a puzzle where every piece depended on another piece falling into place first. And while all of this was happening behind the scenes, one insider offered a completely different perspective, one that suggested the Warriors might not even be as high on LeBron's list as everyone assumed. According to Charania's later reporting, despite everything that had gone on, Golden State was not considered a top-tier landing spot for LeBron unless the Anthony Davis trade actually came together. Without Davis, the Warriors risked being seen as just another option rather than the frontrunner. And that mattered, because LeBron James was not lacking for suitors. The Cleveland Cavaliers, the team where LeBron first became a superstar, the team he brought a championship to against all odds, remained firmly in the conversation. Imagine that storybook possibility. LeBron returning to the place where his legend truly began, closing the loop on a career that started there and could end there as well. The Miami Heat were in the mix too, a franchise where LeBron once built 2 championships alongside Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. A reunion in Miami would mean playing alongside Giannis Antetokounmpo and Bam Adebayo, a pairing that on paper looked absolutely terrifying for opposing defenses. And then there was Philadelphia, a franchise reportedly making a serious and detailed pitch of its own, one that LeBron was said to be taking seriously as well. So picture the position LeBron James found himself in. 4 different paths in front of him. A homecoming in Cleveland. A reunion in Miami. A fresh challenge in Philadelphia. Or an entirely new experiment in the Bay Area, playing alongside the very team that used to be his greatest rival, with the possibility of adding Anthony Davis to make it a true super team. Every single path came with its own story. Every single path came with its own kind of magic. And that is exactly what made this free agency saga one of the most captivating in recent NBA memory. There was no obvious answer. No easy choice. Just genuine, real suspense about which chapter LeBron would choose to write next. Now, right in the middle of all this chaos, a completely different rumor exploded across social media, one that took the story in a direction almost nobody expected. Whispers began to spread that maybe, just maybe, the relationship between LeBron and Draymond wasn't about LeBron joining the Warriors at all. Maybe it was the opposite. Maybe LeBron was quietly trying to convince Draymond Green to leave Golden State and join him somewhere else entirely. For a franchise that has built its entire identity around continuity, around keeping this same core group together for over a decade, the idea of losing Draymond Green to a reunion with LeBron on a different team felt almost unthinkable. Fans panicked. Talk shows debated it for hours. Was Golden State's own recruiting pitch somehow backfiring? Was Draymond about to walk away from the only franchise he has ever known? But then came the response that cooled the entire rumor down. ESPN's Brian Windhorst, one of the most plugged-in reporters covering LeBron James for years, addressed the speculation directly. He explained that he had not heard anything from a credible source to support the idea that LeBron was actively recruiting Draymond away from the Warriors. In his own words, he simply had not heard that from anyone reliable. That single statement helped settle the panic, at least for now. The far more grounded version of the story remained the one everyone had been following all along. Draymond wasn't being recruited away. Draymond was doing the recruiting. He wanted LeBron in Golden State, not the other way around. Still, the fact that this rumor even existed tells you something important about how unpredictable this entire situation had become. When a story is moving fast enough that people start speculating about role reversals like that, you know the stakes are enormous. Meanwhile, the Warriors were not simply sitting back and waiting on LeBron's decision. They kept building. Kristaps Porzingis officially signed on with Golden State, agreeing to a new contract to remain part of the roster moving forward. For a team hoping to construct a title-contending group around Curry and Green, locking in a talented big man who can space the floor and protect the rim was a meaningful step forward, regardless of how the LeBron situation eventually played out. At the same time, Golden State's general manager acknowledged publicly just how much work still needed to be done, admitting that this roster needed improvement in almost every possible area. That kind of honesty from the front office told fans something important. This wasn't a team pretending they already had everything figured out. This was a team actively working, piece by piece, to build something worthy of LeBron James's talents, worthy of one final championship run with this era-defining Warriors core. As the days rolled on, insiders continued offering slightly different takes on where things stood. One well-connected reporter described the Warriors as remaining just as involved in the LeBron sweepstakes as any other team pursuing him, acknowledging that while reunions in Cleveland or Miami would carry a kind of poetic, storybook feeling, there was something uniquely exciting about the idea of this new, star-packed Golden State roster taking shape, drawing comparisons to the kind of excitement usually reserved for an all-star team or even a Team USA roster. Can you imagine that lineup taking the court together for the first time? Stephen Curry pulling up from 30 feet. Draymond Green organizing the defense and barking instructions like a coach on the floor. Kristaps Porzingis stretching the floor from the 5 spot. And LeBron James, even in this stage of his career, still capable of taking over a game in ways that remind you exactly why he has been called the best player alive for the better part of 2 decades. It's the kind of roster that would immediately reshape the entire hierarchy of the Western Conference. It's the kind of roster that broadcasters and analysts would spend the entire season breaking down, debating, and marveling at. And it's the kind of roster that, if it comes together, will be remembered as one of the boldest, most surprising team-building achievements in modern NBA history. But nothing about this story has been simple, and nothing about it has stayed still for very long. Every single week seemed to bring a new twist. A new report. A new voice offering a slightly different version of the truth. One day the Warriors looked like the clear frontrunner. The next day, reports suggested Cleveland or Miami had the real inside track. One day it seemed like Draymond's sacrifice was going to be the deciding factor. The next day, it seemed like everything hinged entirely on whether Golden State could actually complete a trade for Anthony Davis. That is what made this saga so gripping to follow in real time. It wasn't a predictable story with an obvious ending. It was a live, shifting negotiation playing out across podcasts, television appearances, and insider reports, with two of basketball's biggest names, LeBron James and Draymond Green, sitting quietly at the center of it, their genuine friendship somehow becoming the emotional engine driving one of the most dramatic recruiting battles the league has ever witnessed. Think about the sheer weight of what Draymond Green was risking here. This is a man who has spent his entire career fighting for Golden State. A man whose identity, whose reputation, whose legacy as a champion is completely wrapped up in that jersey. And yet, he was willing to give up guaranteed money, willing to put his own financial future on the line, simply because he believed there was a chance, even a small one, to bring his friend into the fold and chase one more championship together before either of their careers reached their final chapter. That is not something players do lightly. That is not a decision made out of simple business logic. That is a decision made out of belief. Belief in a vision. Belief in a friendship. Belief that some opportunities are worth the risk, even when the outcome is far from guaranteed. And LeBron James, for his part, remains at the center of a decision that will shape not just his own legacy, but the direction of at least 4 different franchises. Every team involved in this pursuit represents a completely different story. Every choice carries its own kind of meaning. Cleveland offers closure and nostalgia. Miami offers a reunion wrapped inside a brand new contending core. Philadelphia offers a fresh challenge in a city hungry for a championship. And Golden State offers something almost poetic, a chance to finally stand shoulder to shoulder with the very rivals who once stood in his way, chasing one final ring together instead of fighting over it. Nobody outside of LeBron James's inner circle knows exactly which way this will go. Reports shift by the day. Insiders disagree with each other constantly. And through it all, the two friends who started this entire chapter of speculation, LeBron James and Draymond Green, continue to spend time together, continue to talk, continue writing a story that nobody could have predicted just a year ago. Maybe it ends with LeBron James pulling on a Golden State jersey, standing alongside Curry and Green, chasing a championship with the very team that used to be his greatest obstacle. Maybe it ends with a homecoming in Cleveland, closing the loop on a career that began there. Maybe it ends in Miami, back among old friends and new stars. Or maybe it ends somewhere else entirely, in a story nobody has even considered yet. But one thing is certain. Whatever LeBron James decides, it will send shockwaves through the entire league. It will reshape the balance of power in the NBA. And it will add one more unforgettable chapter to the legacy of a player who has already given basketball fans more than 2 decades of unforgettable moments. The next few weeks promise to be some of the most closely watched in recent NBA history. Every meeting will be scrutinized. Every report will be dissected. Every rumor will spark 1,000 debates online. Because when a player of LeBron James's stature is deciding where to spend what could be one of the final chapters of his career, the entire basketball world leans in and holds its breath. So keep your eyes open, because this story is far from finished. The Warriors have made their intentions clear. Draymond Green has made his sacrifice. Stephen Curry has made his pitch. And LeBron James, the man at the center of it all, is still writing the ending. Let's slow down for a moment and really sit with what this would mean if it actually happens, because I don't think people have fully processed how strange and wonderful this would be. For almost the entire 2010s and well into the 2020s, LeBron James and the Golden State Warriors defined an era of basketball by standing directly opposite each other. Entire summers were spent debating which dynasty was better. Entire seasons built toward the possibility of another finals collision between them. Kids growing up watching basketball during that stretch picked sides. You were either a LeBron fan or a Warriors fan, and the rivalry felt almost tribal at times. Announcers built entire broadcasts around the tension between these two forces. It was, without question, one of the defining rivalries in the history of American professional sports. And now, all these years later, the idea that these two sides could merge into one roster feels almost surreal. It's the kind of storyline that sounds like a rumor invented for a video game franchise mode, not something that could actually be unfolding in real-life free agency. But that is exactly the situation the entire basketball world found itself watching this summer. Think about how this would look from the perspective of a longtime fan who sat through every one of those finals matchups. Someone who remembers Draymond Green getting into shouting matches with LeBron in the tunnel. Someone who remembers the emotional swings of watching their team lose heartbreaking games in the closing minutes. Someone who remembers celebrating a championship specifically because it came at LeBron's expense. For that fan, watching Draymond Green personally recruit LeBron to come join the Warriors is almost dizzying. It rewires everything you thought you understood about loyalty, about rivalry, about how these stories are supposed to end. But that is precisely why this story captured so much attention. It broke the mold. It defied the expected pattern of how legendary rivalries typically conclude. Instead of fading quietly into retirement on separate sides of the league, these two competitors were exploring the idea of standing on the very same sideline, wearing the very same jersey, chasing one more banner together. Now, let's talk for a moment about the emotional core of this story, because underneath all the trade speculation and salary cap discussions, there is something deeply human happening here. Draymond Green is not just a basketball player making a business decision. He is a man nearing the twilight of an incredible career, watching the clock tick down on an era he helped build from nothing. When he first arrived in Golden State, the Warriors were far from a championship contender. Nobody outside of the Bay Area took them seriously. Draymond, alongside Curry, alongside Klay Thompson in the years that followed, helped transform that franchise into one of the most dominant dynasties basketball has ever seen. He has given everything to that organization. His body, his voice, his fire, his identity. And now, staring down the twilight of his own playing days, he is faced with a stark reality. Championship windows close. Bodies age. Legendary cores eventually break apart. Draymond understands, probably better than almost anyone else in the league, that opportunities like this do not come around twice. If there is even a small chance to add a player like LeBron James to this roster, to give this era one final, spectacular chapter before it inevitably ends, he is going to fight for it with everything he has. That is why declining nearly $30 million in guaranteed money means so much more than just a financial transaction. It is a statement of priorities. It says that winning one more championship, chasing one more parade down Market Street with Curry by his side, matters more to him right now than security. It says that legacy, in his mind, is worth more than money at this stage of his career. And on the other side of this story stands LeBron James, a player who has already secured his place among the greatest to ever step onto a basketball court. 4 championships. Multiple MVP awards. A place at the very top of the NBA's all-time scoring list. There is very little left for him to prove statistically. And yet, here he is, still searching for one more chapter, still willing to consider a dramatic change of scenery in pursuit of something meaningful. Why would a player with nothing left to prove put himself through the uncertainty of free agency at this stage of his career? The answer, most likely, comes down to something deeper than stats or records. It comes down to wanting to feel that competitive fire one more time. Wanting to walk into a locker room surrounded by teammates who share the same hunger. Wanting to give his fans, and himself, one more unforgettable ride before the final buzzer sounds on his playing days. That is what makes a potential Warriors move so compelling. It is not just about talent, although the talent involved here is undeniable. It is about two competitors who spent a decade trying to take championships away from each other, potentially deciding to chase one final title side by side instead. Now let's talk about the other side of this equation, because it would be unfair to pretend the other suitors weren't putting up a serious fight of their own. Cleveland's pitch is rooted in something no other franchise can offer, and that is history. LeBron James became a superstar wearing a Cavaliers jersey. He delivered the franchise's only championship in 2016, a moment so emotional, so historic, that it is still remembered as one of the greatest comebacks in the history of professional sports. A return to Cleveland would not just be a business decision. It would be a full-circle moment, a chance to close the loop on a career that began in that city, grew into legend elsewhere, and could conceivably come home again before the final chapter is written. Miami's pitch carries its own emotional weight as well. LeBron won 2 championships there, forming one of the most talked-about super teams in league history alongside Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. Returning to Miami would mean stepping into a very different roster this time around, one built around Giannis Antetokounmpo's overwhelming physical dominance and Bam Adebayo's do-it-all versatility. It's a completely different flavor of contender than the one LeBron played for during his first stint there, but the emotional connection to that city, that franchise, and that culture remains real. And then there is Philadelphia, a franchise that has spent years searching for the kind of transformative star power capable of finally pushing them over the top in a crowded Eastern Conference. Reports describing a detailed, serious pitch from the Sixers suggest they were not simply hoping LeBron might consider them as a backup option. They were actively building a genuine case for why their city, their roster, and their vision deserved serious consideration. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, you start to understand just how remarkable this entire situation really is. For different franchises, each offering a completely different story, each representing a completely different version of how LeBron James's career could conclude. There is no wrong answer here in terms of basketball opportunity. Every single path leads somewhere meaningful. Which is exactly why this decision has been so difficult, and why it has taken so long to resolve. Meanwhile, back in the Bay Area, the tension inside the Warriors organization has been almost impossible to ignore. Every report, every rumor, every subtle shift in language from insiders sends ripples through the fan base. One day, optimism spikes as reports suggest serious momentum toward a deal. The next day, uncertainty creeps back in as insiders suggest Golden State might not even crack the top tier of options unless the Anthony Davis trade comes together. That kind of emotional whiplash has defined this entire offseason for Warriors fans. Imagine waking up every single morning during this stretch, checking your phone, refreshing your favorite basketball news source, just to see whether today is the day the biggest domino in NBA free agency finally falls. Imagine the collective anxiety of an entire fan base, hanging on every word from insiders like Shams Charania, Ramona Shelburne, Brian Windhorst, and countless others, trying to piece together fragments of information into some kind of coherent picture. That is the emotional reality of modern free agency. It's not just about the players making decisions behind closed doors. It's about millions of fans across the country living and dying with every new report, every new rumor, every new twist in a story that refuses to settle down. And through it all, two men, LeBron James and Draymond Green, remain at the quiet center of the storm. Not shouting from rooftops. Not staging dramatic public announcements. Just talking. Just spending time together. Just quietly working through what might be one of the most consequential decisions of both of their careers. It's worth remembering, too, that this entire situation exists within a league that has changed dramatically over the years. Free agency in the modern NBA is no longer just about money or championship odds. It's about legacy, about relationships, about wanting to spend the final years of a legendary career surrounded by people who understand exactly what it took to get there. LeBron James and Draymond Green share that understanding in a way that very few players around the league can match. They have stood across from each other in the sport's biggest moments. They know exactly what it costs to win at the highest level. And that shared understanding may end up meaning more than any amount of salary cap flexibility or roster construction ever could. So as this story continues to unfold, keep this in mind. Every report you see, every insider update, every fresh piece of speculation is really just one small piece of a much bigger, much more human story. A story about two rivals who became friends. A story about a franchise trying to squeeze one final run out of a legendary era. A story about a player trying to decide how he wants to write the final chapters of an already historic career. Whatever happens next, one thing is guaranteed. When the decision finally comes, it will be a moment the entire basketball world remembers for years to come. And whether LeBron James ends up back home in Cleveland, reunited in Miami, starting fresh in Philadelphia, or standing shoulder to shoulder with his former rivals in Golden State, this offseason will be remembered as one of the wildest, most emotionally charged free agency sagas the NBA has ever produced. Keep watching. Keep paying attention. Because this story is not over yet, and the ending, whatever it turns out to be, is going to be unforgettable.